The fluorescent lights of the grocery store buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made my bruises look worse than they already were. I kept my head down, focusing on the cracked linoleum beneath my worn sneakers, counting tiles to distract myself from the throbbing in my ribs. 12 tiles to the produce section, 23 to the canned goods. If I could just make it through this shopping trip without incident, without drawing attention, without... Move faster. Derek's voice cut through my mental arithmetic like a blade, his hand clamped around my upper arm, fingers digging into flesh that was already tender from last night. We don't have all day. I nodded mutely, reaching for a can of tomatoes with my free hand. The metal was cool against my palm, grounding. Real. I had learned not to speak unless spoken to. Not to make eye contact with other shoppers. Not to exist any louder than absolutely necessary. 3 years of marriage had taught me that invisibility was survival. The store smelled of cleaning chemicals and overripe bananas, mingling with the cheap cologne Derek had doused himself in this morning. It made my stomach turn, but I'd long since learned to breathe through my mouth, to swallow down the nausea along with everything else. "You're embarrassing me," he hissed, close enough that I could feel his breath hot against my ear. Walking around like some pathetic kicked dog. Stand up straight. I straightened my spine, wincing as the movement pulled at something tender beneath my ribs. A middle-aged woman in the next aisle glanced our way, her eyes lingering on Derek's grip on my arm before sliding away with practiced indifference. I'd seen that look before. The one that said not my problem, the one that let people sleep at night while women like me counted bruises instead of blessings. We moved through the aisles in tense silence, Derek dictating what went into the cart with the same controlling precision he applied to every aspect of my life. Not that brand. Too expensive. What do you need shampoo for? You barely leave the house. The itemized cruelty of his attention never wavered, never softened. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably another text from my mother asking why I never called anymore. I didn't dare check it. Derek had rules about phones, rules about everything. You forgot the milk. His voice was deceptively quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded thunder. My heart stuttered. "I'll go grab it. You're dead when we get home." The words were casual, conversational even, delivered with the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather. But I knew Derek's vocabulary of violence. I knew exactly what those words meant. What waited for me behind our closed door, where no one could see, where no one would intervene. Fear tasted like copper on my tongue. I hurried toward the dairy section at the back of the store, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the cart handle. The cold air from the refrigerated cases kissed my flushed cheeks as I reached for the milk, trying to steady my breathing, trying to... The cart jerked backward. I'd bumped into something. Someone. "I'm so sorry, The apology died on my lips as I turned. The man standing behind me didn't belong in this sad, fluorescent-lit grocery store on the wrong side of town. He belonged in magazines, in movies, in some other stratosphere entirely, tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair styled with careless perfection and a face that could have been carved from marble. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath. Dark, almost black, and utterly unreadable. They swept over me with an intensity that felt like being x-rayed, seeing past skin and bone to something deeper. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than my car, tailored so precisely it looked like a second skin. The fabric whispered money, power, danger. Behind him stood 2 men who could only be security, broad-shouldered, alert, their eyes constantly scanning the store. One spoke quietly into a discreet earpiece. This wasn't the kind of man who shopped for his own groceries. No harm done. His voice was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of something else beneath it. An accent, maybe. Or simply the confidence of someone who'd never had to apologize for taking up space. He stepped aside with fluid grace. But those dark eyes never left my face. I became suddenly, painfully aware of how I must look. Faded jeans with a hole in the knee. A sweater 2 sizes too big, chosen specifically to hide the finger-shaped bruises on my arms. Hair pulled back in a messy ponytail because Derek said styling it was a waste of time. No makeup because Derek said I was trying to attract attention. Heat flooded my cheeks. I should watch where I'm going. Should you? Something flickered in his expression. Curiosity, perhaps, or recognition of some kind. His gaze dropped briefly to where my hand clutched the cart handle, knuckles white with tension. Then lower, to the purple-yellow bruise peeking out from beneath my sleeve. I tugged the fabric down reflexively. A movement so automatic it happened before conscious thought. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. When he looked back at my face, something had shifted in those dark eyes. Something cold and calculating and utterly terrifying in its intensity. "Ava!" Derek's bark made me flinch so violently I actually stumbled backward. The stranger's hand shot out, steadying me with a grip that was surprisingly gentle for someone who radiated such coiled danger. His fingers circled my wrist, not gripping, just touching, and even through my panic I registered the heat of his skin, the expensive scent of his cologne. Cedar and something darker, smoke and secrets. Don't touch my wife. Derek appeared at my side, his face mottled red with rage. He grabbed my other arm, yanking me away from the stranger with enough force that I gasped. "Who the hell do you think you are?" The temperature in the aisle seemed to drop 10 degrees. The stranger released my wrist slowly, deliberately, his eyes fixed on Derek with the kind of focus a predator gives prey. He didn't speak. Didn't need to. The 2 security guards had moved closer, flanking him with military precision. One of them had his hand inside his jacket. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then the stranger smiled. It was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. A slash of white teeth that held absolutely no warmth, no humor. Just promise. Dark, inevitable promise. "Nobody," he said softly. The word somehow more threatening than any shout could be. Nobody at all. Derek's grip on my arm loosened fractionally. Even he, in all his bullying confidence, recognized something in this man that made his primitive hindbrain scream warnings. I felt him shift his weight, caught the sharp tang of his sudden fear sweat, cutting through the cheap cologne. "We're leaving." Derek's voice had lost its edge, gone brittle. He dragged me backward, the cart abandoned, milk forgotten. I risked one glance back. The stranger stood perfectly still in the fluorescent light, dark suit immaculate, expression unreadable, but his eyes... God. His eyes followed me with an intensity that made my skin prickle with something that wasn't quite fear. Something more complicated, more dangerous. One of the security guards murmured something to him. He raised a hand, silencing the man without looking away from me. From the visible evidence of Derek's ownership written across my skin in shades of purple and green. Then we were through the automatic doors, the cool evening air hitting my face like a slap. Derek's hand was a vice on my arm as he hauled me across the parking lot toward our beat-up Honda. His breath came fast and angry, the kind of breathing that preceded the worst of his rages. What the fuck was that? He shoved me against the car hard enough that my hip bone connected with the door handle. Pain bloomed sharp and bright. "You think you can embarrass me like that? Letting some pretty boy put his hands on you? I didn't. He was just..." The explanation strangled itself in my throat as his hand fisted in my hair. "You're dead when we get home," he repeated, this time close enough that spittle flecked my cheek. "You hear me? Dead." He released me with a shove and rounded the car to the driver's side. I stood there trembling, hand pressed against my bruised hip, and looked back at the grocery store entrance. The stranger stood just inside the glass doors, backlit by that harsh fluorescent glow. He'd followed us, watched the entire encounter. His phone was pressed to his ear, and even from this distance I could see the rigid set of his shoulders, the dangerous stillness of his posture. Our eyes met across the parking lot. Something passed between us in that moment. Some wordless understanding, some connection I couldn't name and didn't want to examine. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, wind whipping around me, knowing that one step forward would be either flight or falling, and I wouldn't know which until it was too late to choose. "Get in the car." Derek's shout shattered the moment. I climbed into the passenger seat, hands still shaking as I clicked the seatbelt. Through the side mirror, I watched the stranger lower his phone. Watched him say something to one of his guards. Watched the guard nod and pull out his own phone, fingers moving quickly across the screen. Then Derek was peeling out of the parking lot, tires squealing, and the grocery store, and the dangerous man in the expensive suit disappeared behind us. The drive home took 12 minutes. I counted every second, my mind racing through possibilities, through consequences. Derek's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grinding. The silence in the car was suffocating, pregnant with violence waiting to be born. When we pulled into the driveway of our small rental house, my whole body went rigid. This was it. The moment I'd been dreading since those words in the grocery store. "You're dead when we get home." Derek killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. Inside. One word. A command. I reached for the door handle with numb fingers, my mind already dissociating, already preparing for whatever came next. This was the worst part, the anticipation, the knowing. At least when his fists flew, there was no time to think, to fear, to... Headlights flooded the driveway. A black SUV. No, 2 black SUVs. Pulled up to the curb in front of our house. Sleek, expensive, with tinted windows that reflected the streetlights like dark mirrors. The engines purred with restrained power, a sound that spoke of money and influence, and things Derek and I would never touch in our small, violent lives. What the hell? Derek's hand was already on his door handle. But he hesitated. Even he could recognize when something was out of place, when the normal rules of his kingdom might not apply. The driver's door of the first SUV opened, and one of the security guards from the grocery store stepped out, the same one who'd had his hand in his jacket, ready to draw whatever weapon he carried. He was even more imposing in the amber glow of the streetlights, his expression carved from granite. Then the back door opened, and he stepped out. The stranger from the grocery store emerged with the same fluid grace I'd noticed before, his dark suit somehow still immaculate despite the late hour. He buttoned his jacket with precise movements, his eyes fixed on our house, on me, visible through the windshield, with that same unreadable intensity. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought they might crack. "Stay in the car," Derek hissed, his earlier bravado evaporating like morning fog. "Don't you dare." But the stranger was already walking up our driveway, his security flanking him like shadows. Each step was measured, purposeful, inevitable. He moved like someone who'd never been told no, never been denied, never had a door closed in his face. He stopped at Derek's window and knocked. 2 sharp raps that sounded like a judge's gavel. Derek hesitated, his face cycling through emotions. Confusion, anger, fear. Finally, he rolled down the window halfway, as if the glass could protect him from whatever this was. "Can I help you?" Derek's voice was trying for aggressive but landing somewhere around nervous. The stranger leaned down, bringing his face level with Derek's. Up close, his beauty was almost inhuman, too perfect, too cold, like a statue given breath but not warmth. "I'm going to give you a choice," he said, his voice carrying easily in the quiet suburban street. "You can walk away from this house, get in your car, and disappear. Permanently. Or..." He paused, letting the single word hang between them like a noose. "Or what?" Derek tried to laugh, but it came out strangled. "Who the fuck do you think you are, coming to my house threatening... I'm the man who's going to kill you if you lay another hand on your wife." The words were spoken with such casual certainty, such complete conviction, that even I, sitting frozen in the passenger seat, believed him absolutely. Derek's face went pale. "You can't just..." "I can." The stranger straightened, glancing at his watch with the air of someone checking the time before a business meeting. "I will. The only question is whether you're smart enough to take the opportunity I'm offering. Walk away now, tonight, and you get to live. Stay." His dark eyes cut to me, just for a second, before returning to Derek. "Stay, and I promise you, what you've done to her will seem gentle compared to what I'll do to you." "This is insane." Derek's voice had gone high, panicked. "You can't. There are laws. I'll call the cops." One of the security guards stepped forward, holding out a phone. On the screen, I could see video footage. Grainy, but clear enough. Derek's hand fisted in my hair outside the grocery store, the shove against the car, his mouth forming those words, "You're dead when we get home." Please do call the police, the stranger said pleasantly. I'm sure they'd be very interested in this footage. In the hospital records I've already obtained from the 3 times your wife has been to the ER in the past year. In the testimonies I can produce from your neighbors about the sounds coming from this house. He tilted his head, that terrible smile returning. Or you can save everyone the trouble and just disappear. Derek looked at me then, really looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes was something I'd never seen before. Helplessness. For the first time in 3 years, Derek was the one who was powerless, the one who was afraid, the one who had no control. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of that cliff again, wind howling, knowing that whatever came next would change everything. You have 60 seconds to decide, the stranger said, checking his watch again. Starting now. Derek's hands trembled on the steering wheel. I watched the tremor spread from his fingers to his wrists, the same hands that had left those bruises, now shaking like leaves in a storm. The silence stretched taut between us, broken only by the quiet idling of those expensive SUVs and the harsh rasp of Derek's breathing. 45 seconds, the stranger said, his voice carrying no inflection. Just fact, just inevitability. You're insane, Derek whispered, but the fight had already drained from his voice. He was deflating before my eyes, shrinking into something smaller, weaker, something that couldn't hurt me anymore. She's my wife. You can't just... 30 seconds. Derek looked at me again, and I saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. Saw him weighing his options, measuring his chances. For a moment, I thought he might actually fight, might actually try to assert the ownership he'd claimed over me for 3 years. Then his shoulders sagged. Fine. The word came out broken. Fine. I'll go. But this isn't over. You can't watch her forever, and when you're gone, the stranger moved so fast I barely tracked it. One moment, he was standing by the window. The next, he had Derek's door open and Derek halfway out of the car, one hand fisted in Derek's collar, the other braced against the doorframe. Their faces were inches apart. Let me be crystal clear, the stranger said, his voice dropping to something barely above a whisper. Something infinitely more terrifying than any shout. If you ever come near her again, if you so much as think about her, I will find you. And what I do to you will make you beg for death long before I grant it. Do you understand me? Derek nodded frantically, his face purple-red, gasping for air. The stranger released him with a shove that sent Derek stumbling backward onto the driveway. Get whatever you need from inside. You have 5 minutes. She stays in the car. Derek scrambled toward the house, his earlier swagger completely evaporated. I watched him go. This man who'd controlled every aspect of my existence for 3 years, reduced to a frightened animal fleeing a predator. The stranger turned to look at me through the windshield. Our eyes met, and my breath caught. There was something in his gaze that hadn't been there before, something almost possessive. Like Derek had been eliminated not as a threat to my safety, but as competition, as an obstacle between him and something he wanted, me. The realization sent ice water through my veins. One of the security guards approached him, murmuring something too low for me to hear. The stranger nodded without looking away from me, then finally, mercifully, broke eye contact to speak into his phone. I sat frozen in the passenger seat, my mind racing. What had just happened? Who was this man? And why? God, why? Had he intervened? People didn't do this. Didn't track down strangers' homes. Didn't threaten their abusive husbands. Didn't orchestrate rescues like something out of a movie, unless they wanted something in return. The thought made my stomach clench. I'd escaped one cage only to find myself staring at another, this one gilded and dangerous in entirely different ways. Derek emerged from the house 4 minutes later, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his movements jerky and panicked. He didn't look at me, didn't say goodbye. Just threw his bag in the back of his truck, parked on the street, and climbed in. The engine roared to life, and then he was gone. Taillights disappearing around the corner like a bad dream evaporating in daylight. Except this wasn't daylight. And the nightmare wasn't over. It had just changed shape. The stranger approached my door and I realized my hands were gripping the seatbelt so tightly my knuckles had gone white. He tapped gently on the window, so different from Derek's aggressive knock, and waited. I rolled it down with shaking fingers. "Are you hurt?" His voice was different now, softer, almost gentle, though that dangerous edge never quite disappeared. "Do you need medical attention?" I shook my head mutely, not trusting my voice. "When did you last eat?" The question was so unexpected that I actually answered. "This morning." "Toast." Something flickered across his face. Displeasure, maybe, or calculation. "You should eat. Come." It wasn't a request. He opened my door, extending a hand to help me out. I stared at it, at the long fingers, the expensive watch glinting at his wrist, the silver ring on his right hand carved with some symbol I didn't recognize. This hand had just choked Derek, had threatened murder with casual certainty, and now it was being offered to me like I was something precious, something breakable. I took it. His grip was warm, steady, and infinitely careful as he helped me from the car. Up close, I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. He was even taller than I'd realized, and the scent of him, that cedar and smoke, wrapped around me like a claim. "What's your name?" I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Dante." He said it like it was a complete sentence, like nothing else needed to be added. "And you're Ava. How did you—" "Your husband said it, in the store." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Though he's not your husband anymore, the papers will be filed tomorrow. Uncontested divorce, citing abuse. You'll be free of him legally within 6 weeks. My head spun. "You can't just— that's not how it works. It is when you have the right lawyers." He guided me toward the first SUV with a hand at the small of my back. The touch light, but somehow commanding. "And the right influence." One of the security guards opened the back door, and I found myself hesitating at the threshold. Everything in my body screamed warnings. This was wrong. Dangerous. I was trading one form of control for another, one cage for a prettier one. But what choice did I have? Go back into that house alone, where Derek's presence still lingered in every room like a stain, where I'd learned to sleep lightly, to anticipate his moods, to make myself small and quiet and invisible. At least this danger was new. Unknown. And there was something in Dante's eyes when he looked at me. Something dark and obsessive, yes, but also something that promised I would never have to make myself small again. I climbed into the SUV. The interior was all black leather and tinted windows, luxury so complete it felt like entering another world entirely. Dante slid in beside me, maintaining a careful distance, while one security guard took the driver's seat and the other climbed into the passenger side. The doors closed with heavy, final thuds. We pulled away from my house, Derek's house, and I watched it recede in the side mirror. 3 years of my life, disappearing behind tinted glass. "Where are we going?" I asked, my hands twisted together in my lap. "To eat. Then somewhere safe." Dante was looking at his phone, scrolling through messages with focused attention. "You can't stay in that house. It's not secure." "Secure from what?" He glanced up, those dark eyes pinning me in place. "From him, if he's stupid enough to come back. From anyone else who might think you're vulnerable." A pause. "From yourself, if you're considering going back to him." I would never. You'd be surprised what fear makes people do." He returned his attention to the phone, dismissing the topic. "Marco, take us to Salvatore's. Tell them to prepare the private room." "Yes, sir." The driver, Marco, responded immediately. I stared at Dante's profile, trying to reconcile the man who'd just orchestrated my escape with the casual way he commanded everyone around him. The expensive suit, the security detail, the certainty that divorce papers would be filed, that lawyers would handle everything, that his word was law. "Who are you?" I asked quietly. "Really?" He smiled, and it was the first real smile I'd seen from him. Not that terrifying slash of teeth from the grocery store, but something genuine, something almost warm, if warmth could exist in something so inherently dangerous. "Does it matter?" "Yes." I surprised myself with the firmness in my voice. If I'm going to trust you, if I'm going to let you, whatever this is, then yes, it matters. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned back against the leather seat, his body angled toward mine but still maintaining that careful distance. My family has certain business interests in this city, he said carefully. Interests that require discretion and influence. I saw something in that grocery store that offended me. A man treating his wife like property, like something he could break and discard, so I decided to intervene. It was a non-answer, dressed up as an explanation, and we both knew it. "You're Mafia," I said. Not a question. The pieces had been falling into place since he'd stepped out of that SUV. The security, the casual threats of murder, the certainty that he could make a man disappear. Dante's smile widened fractionally. That's a very dramatic word, but accurate. Perhaps. He tilted his head, studying me with that unsettling intensity. Does that frighten you? I should have said yes. Should have demanded he let me out of the car. Should have run as far and fast as possible from this beautiful, dangerous man who looked at me like I was something he intended to keep. But I'd been frightened for 3 years. I'd lived with fear as my constant companion, had learned its taste and texture and weight. And somehow, the fear I felt sitting next to Dante was different. Sharper. More alive. I don't know, I answered honestly. I don't know what I feel. Good. He reached over, slowly, giving me time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair back from my face. His fingers grazed my cheek, and I shivered despite the warmth of the car. Fear is honest. It means you're paying attention. The SUV pulled to a stop in front of a restaurant I'd passed 1,000 times but never entered, Salvatore's. The kind of place with cloth napkins and wine lists thicker than novels, where reservations were made months in advance, and the cheapest entree cost more than I made in a week. Marco opened the door, and Dante stepped out first, then offered me his hand again. I took it, letting him help me from the car, acutely aware of my worn jeans and oversized sweater, the bruises on my arms, the fact that I looked like exactly what I was. A woman who'd just escaped her abuser, displaced and lost. But if Dante noticed or cared about my appearance, he gave no indication. He simply placed his hand at the small of my back again, that possessive, guiding touch, and led me toward the entrance. The door opened before we reached it, held by a man in an impeccable suit who nodded deferentially to Dante. "Mr. Salvatore, your room is ready." Salvatore, the same name as the restaurant. "He owns this place," I murmured, as we stepped into a foyer decorated with old-world elegance, dark wood and brass fixtures and oil paintings in gilt frames. "He owns many places," Dante corrected softly. "This is just one of them." We were led through the main dining room, past tables filled with well-dressed couples and business associates, their conversations creating a low hum of civilized society. Eyes followed us, or rather, followed Dante, with a mixture of respect, curiosity, and in some cases fear. This was his world, a world where people parted like water before him, where doors opened at his approach, where his word could unmake lives or spare them. And somehow, I'd stumbled into it. The private room was at the back of the restaurant, access through a hallway lined with more oil paintings. Inside, a single table had been set for 2, candles already lit, wine already breathing in a crystal decanter. The lighting was low, intimate, the kind of setting designed for romance or seduction, or possession. Dante pulled out my chair, waiting until I sat before taking his own seat across from me. Marco and the other guard positioned themselves outside the door, granting us privacy, but remaining close enough to respond to any threat. A waiter appeared almost immediately, pouring wine without asking if we wanted it, then disappearing just as quickly. "Eat," Dante said, gesturing to the menu that had been placed before me. "Whatever you want. Don't look at the prices." I opened the menu and immediately felt overwhelmed. Everything was in Italian, with small English translations underneath. Dishes I'd never heard of, ingredients I couldn't pronounce. My hands started shaking again. Dante reached across the table and gently closed the menu. "Do you trust me?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning that went far beyond food. "I don't know you," I said carefully. Then let me rephrase. Will you trust me for tonight to take care of you? There was something in his voice, something almost vulnerable beneath all that controlled power, like my answer mattered, like he needed me to say yes, and God help me. I did. Yes. His expression transformed. That dangerous smile returned, but this time it held warmth, satisfaction, triumph. He summoned the waiter with a subtle gesture and ordered in rapid Italian, the words flowing like music. The waiter nodded, scribbling notes, and disappeared again. Now, Dante said, his attention returning to me with laser focus. Tell me about yourself, Ava, everything. There's not much to tell. I wrapped my hands around the wine glass, feeling the cool crystal against my palms. The deep red liquid inside caught the candlelight, transforming into something that looked like liquid rubies. I'd never had wine that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I'm nobody. Just Ava. Just Ava, Dante repeated, as if testing the words. Who works where? Pete's diner. Night shifts, mostly. I took a sip of wine to avoid his gaze. It was smooth, complex, nothing like the cheap bottles Derek occasionally brought home. I dropped out of college when I married Derek. He said we couldn't afford it, that I needed to work instead. What were you studying? The question surprised me. No one had asked me that in years. Literature. I wanted to be a teacher, maybe, work with kids. I laughed, but it came out hollow. Stupid dream. Not stupid. His voice held an edge that made me look up. Deferred. There's a difference. Before I could respond, the waiter returned with the first course. Something delicate and artistic on white porcelain, garnished with microgreens and a drizzle of sauce that looked like edible gold. I stared at it, having no idea what it was or how to eat it. Dante picked up his fork with practiced ease, and I mimicked his movements, bringing a small bite to my lips. The explosion of flavor, butter and herbs and something savory I couldn't identify, made me close my eyes involuntarily. Good? There was amusement in his voice. I've never tasted anything like this, I admitted, opening my eyes to find him watching me with that intense focus that made my skin prickle with awareness. Derek and we ate a lot of ramen, canned soup, whatever was cheapest. Something dark flickered across Dante's face. And he hit you. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes. How long? Since about 6 months after we got married. The words came easier than I expected, like lancing a wound that had festered too long. At first it was just pushes, slaps. Then it got worse. He said I made him do it, that if I was just better, quieter, prettier, more obedient, he wouldn't have to. Dante's jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle jumping, his fingers tightened around his fork, knuckles going white. For a moment I thought he might actually break the silverware. I'm sorry, I said quickly. I shouldn't have. Don't. The single word cut through my apology like a blade. Don't apologize for what he did to you. Don't minimize it. And don't ever, ever suggest that you deserved it. The vehemence in his voice stunned me into silence. He set down his fork with careful precision, as if afraid he might do something violent if he held it any longer. My mother, he said quietly, his eyes fixed on the candle flame between us, was married to a man who thought his fists were arguments. I was 7 when I watched him break her jaw. 8 when he cracked her ribs. By the time I was 10, I'd learned that some men need to be removed from this world, permanently. My breath caught. What happened to him? Dante's smile was cold, empty of anything resembling mercy. He fell down the stairs. Very unfortunate accident. Broke his neck. The implication was clear. Not an accident at all. You killed him, I whispered. I protected what was mine. He met my eyes again, and the intensity there made me feel like I was burning from the inside out. Family is everything, Ava. Blood or chosen, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you protect the people who belong to you, at any cost. The waiter returned, clearing our plates and replacing them with the next course. Some kind of pasta that smelled like heaven, the sauce rich and creamy. I should have been hungry. I'd barely eaten all day, but my stomach was too knotted with emotion to properly appreciate the food. Why me? I asked, the question that had been burning in my mind since the grocery store finally breaking free. You don't know me. You saw a stranger being mistreated and you upended your entire evening to rescue her. People don't do that. So why? Dante considered the question while twirling pasta around his fork with the ease of someone who'd grown up eating like this. You remind me of her, he said finally. My mother. The way you held yourself in that store, trying to be invisible, trying not to take up space. The bruises you tried to hide, the fear in your eyes when your husband grabbed you. He paused, his expression hardening. And something else, something that made me want to burn the world down to keep you safe. That's insane, I breathed. You don't even know me. Then I'll learn. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine where it rested beside my plate. His skin was warm, his touch gentle despite the calluses I could feel on his palm. I have time. We have time. The presumption in those words should have angered me, should have sent me running. Instead, I felt something unfurl in my chest, something that had been locked away for so long I'd forgotten it existed. Hope. What do you want from me? I asked, needing to understand, needing to know what I was walking into. Everything. The word was simple, honest, devastating. I want to know your favorite color, your favorite book, what makes you laugh. I want to erase every mark your husband left on your body and replace them with my protection. I want you to look at me the way you're looking at me right now, like I'm terrifying and fascinating in equal measure, until you realize that I'm the safest place you'll ever know. My heart hammered against my ribs. And if I say no? If I tell you I want to leave right now, go back to my life, pretend this never happened? His thumb stroked across my knuckles, a gentle rhythm that contradicted the steel in his voice. Then I'll have Marco drive you wherever you want to go. I'll make sure the divorce papers are still filed, that Derek never bothers you again, and I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been. He paused, his eyes searching mine. But you won't say no, Ava, because you feel it too. This connection. This pull. He was right. God help me. He was right. I pulled my hand back, needing space to think, to breathe. This is crazy. You're talking about... what? Keeping me? Like some kind of possession? Not possession. Protection. He leaned back in his chair, giving me physical distance even as his presence continued to dominate the space. I'm not Derek. I won't cage you, won't diminish you, won't make you afraid to exist. But yes, Ava, I will protect you with everything I have. I will remove threats before they reach you. I will ensure you never have to choose between eating and paying rent, never have to wear bruises like badges of shame, never have to make yourself small for anyone ever again. In exchange for what? Your company, your time, your trust, when you're ready to give it. He gestured to the food between us. Eat, please. You're thinking too hard, and I can see the fear creeping back into your eyes. Just eat. Be here, now with me. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. I picked up my fork with trembling fingers and took a bite of the pasta. It was incredible. Rich and perfectly seasoned, the kind of meal that felt like an experience rather than simple sustenance. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the quiet broken only by the soft classical music filtering through hidden speakers. Blue, I said suddenly. Dante looked up, questioning. My favorite color, you asked? It's blue. Deep blue, like the ocean. I took another bite, feeling braver. And my favorite book is Jane Eyre. I've read it 17 times. His smile transformed his entire face, softening those hard edges into something almost boyish. Jane Eyre, the governess who falls for her employer. How fitting. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. It's not like that, isn't it? He took a sip of his wine, never breaking eye contact. A woman in a difficult situation, rescued by a dark, complicated man with secrets. A relationship built on intensity rather than convention. Mr. Rochester was hiding a wife in the attic, I pointed out. Not exactly romantic. No. But he was honest about his obsession, about wanting Jane with an intensity that bordered on madness. Dante set down his glass. I can relate. The heat in my cheeks spread down my neck. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're stronger than you think. I know you've survived 3 years of hell and still have kindness in your eyes. I know that when you smile, really smile, not that careful, afraid to take up space smile, it would probably break me completely. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something intimate. And I know that I'm going to spend however long it takes to see that real smile, to hear you laugh, to watch you become whoever you were meant to be before Derek convinced you that you were nothing. Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. I blinked them back furiously. You can't just fix me. I'm not trying to fix you, Ava. You're not broken. His expression gentled. But I can give you space to heal, resources to rebuild, protection while you figure out who you want to be now that you're free. The waiter returned once more, clearing plates and presenting dessert. Something chocolate and decadent, artfully plated with fresh berries. I stared at it, my mind spinning. Free. Was I free? Or had I simply traded one form of captivity for another? What happens after this? I asked quietly. After dinner? Where do I go? I have an apartment, top floor, high security, overlooking the city. He must have seen the fear flash across my face because he quickly added, I won't be there. It's empty, furnished, waiting. I'll have clothes brought in for you tomorrow. Anything you need. You'll have complete privacy, complete safety. Marco will be stationed outside if you need anything. And you? I'll be wherever you need me to be, close enough to protect you. Far enough to let you breathe. His eyes held mine. Unless you want me closer. The implication hung heavy in the air between us. I took a shaky breath. I need time. To think. To process all of this. Of course. He pulled out his phone. Typed something quickly. The apartment is ready. We can go whenever you'd like. We finished dessert in silence, the weight of unspoken possibilities pressing down on us both. When Dante finally stood and offered me his hand, I took it without hesitation, letting him guide me back through the restaurant, past the curious stairs, into the waiting SUV. The drive through the city felt surreal. Streetlights blurred past the tinted windows, transforming the familiar landscape into something foreign and dreamlike. Dante sat beside me, close enough that I could feel his body heat, far enough that we weren't touching, respecting my boundaries, even as his presence claimed every inch of space. We pulled up to a building that looked like it belonged in a magazine, all glass and steel and modern luxury. Marco opened my door, and I stepped out onto the sidewalk, craning my neck to see the top floors disappearing into the night sky. Penthouse, Dante said, appearing at my side. 23rd floor. Elevator requires a keycard. He pressed said keycard into my palm, his fingers lingering against mine. You're the only one who has access besides building security. What about you? I'll knock. That almost smile played at his lips. I'm a gentleman, Ava. Mostly. He guided me through the lobby, all marble and minimalist furniture, to a private elevator. The ride up was silent, tension coiling tighter with each passing floor. When the doors opened directly into the apartment, I gasped. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, lights twinkling like fallen stars. The space was open concept, decorated in shades of gray and cream, with furniture that looked like art, a kitchen with appliances I'd only seen on cooking shows, hallways leading to what I assumed were bedrooms. The master suite is through there, Dante indicated with a gesture. Bathroom has a soaking tub and rain shower. Kitchen is fully stocked. There's a washer and dryer in the utility closet. Everything you need. I walked to the windows, pressing my palm against the cool glass, looking out at a city I'd lived in my whole life but never really seen from this perspective. From up here, everything looks small, manageable, safe. It's too much, I whispered. It's yours. Dante came to stand beside me, close enough that I could see his reflection in the glass. For as long as you need it, I turned to face him, suddenly aware of how alone we were. How intimate this felt, this beautiful stranger in this beautiful space, offering me everything while asking for nothing concrete in return. Why are you really doing this? I asked one more time, needing to understand. He reached up slowly, giving me time to pull away, and cupped my cheek in his palm. His touch was gentle, reverent, nothing like Derek's rough handling. Because, he said softly, From the moment I saw you in that grocery store, trying to disappear into yourself while your husband threatened you, something in me recognized something in you. Like calls to like, Ava. Broken pieces fitting together to make something whole. You don't seem broken, I breathed. No? His thumb traced my cheekbone, skimming dangerously close to my lips. I'm a man who builds empires on violence, who solves problems with threats and money and power, who just watched your husband drive away and wished he'd been stupid enough to fight back, just so I'd have an excuse to hurt him the way he hurt you. His eyes were dark, fathomless. I'm very broken, Ava. I just hide it better. My heart raced as he leaned closer, his intentions clear. This was the moment. The choice. I could step back, maintain distance, keep this transaction businesslike and safe. Or I could lean in. His lips brushed mine, barely a touch. Just a whisper of contact, and pulled back, waiting. Asking permission without words. I made my choice. I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his with a desperation that surprised us both. He made a sound low in his throat. Surprise, satisfaction, hunger, and his hand moved to tangle in my hair, angling my head for deeper access. The kiss was nothing like I'd experienced before. Not demanding or punishing, but claiming. Possessive in a way that made me feel precious rather than owned. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against mine. Stay, he murmured. Not because you're afraid, or because you have nowhere else to go. Stay because you want to see where this goes. I don't know what this is, I confessed. Neither do I. His honesty surprised me, but I want to find out. Will you let me? I nodded, not trusting my voice. He smiled, that real smile that transformed him, and pressed one more soft kiss to my forehead. Then I'll see you tomorrow. Sleep well, Ava. You're safe here. I promise. And then he was gone, the elevator doors closing behind him, leaving me alone in this beautiful cage with its open door and the terrifying question of whether I'd just found salvation or walked willingly into something far more dangerous than Derek had ever been. I didn't sleep. How could I? In a bed that felt like sleeping on clouds, in sheets that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, in a silence so complete it felt alien after years of waiting for Derek's heavy footsteps, his angry breathing, his unpredictable violence. I lay awake watching the city lights paint patterns on the ceiling, my mind replaying the past 12 hours on an endless loop. Derek's threats, Dante's intervention, that kiss. God, that kiss. I touched my lips, still able to feel the ghost of his mouth on mine, the way he'd held me like I was something precious and fragile and worth protecting. No one had ever touched me like that, like I mattered. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I gave up on sleep and padded to the massive windows. From up here, the city looked peaceful, almost innocent. I could see the park where I'd sometimes escaped to when Derek's rages got too bad, the diner where I'd worked myself to exhaustion, the grocery store where my life had irrevocably changed. A soft chime made me jump. The elevator. My heart rate spiked as I watched the doors slide open, but it wasn't Dante who emerged. It was a woman, mid-40s, impeccably dressed in a gray pantsuit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She carried several large shopping bags and wore an expression of professional efficiency. Miss Ava? Her accent was faintly European, her smile polite, but not warm. I'm Sophia. Mr. Salvatore sent me to assist you this morning. I pulled my borrowed sweater, the one I'd slept in, tighter around myself. Assist me with what? Everything. She set the bags down on the pristine white sofa. Clothing, toiletries, anything you might need. Mr. Salvatore was quite specific about ensuring your comfort. She gestured to the bags. These are just temporary, of course. This afternoon we have appointments at several boutiques for proper fittings. That's not necessary, I started. But Sophia's raised eyebrow stopped me. Mr. Salvatore was very clear about his expectations. She began unpacking the bags with brisk efficiency. Designer jeans, cashmere sweaters, silk blouses, undergarments that probably cost more than I made in a week. He wants you to have everything you need. And what does he expect in return? The question came out sharper than intended. Sophia paused, meeting my eyes with something that might have been sympathy. That, Miss Ava, you would need to ask him yourself. I'm simply here to help you settle in. She pulled out a phone. Sleek, expensive, clearly new. He also asked me to give you this. His number is already programmed. He said to call if you need anything at all. I took the phone like it might bite. The screen lit up at my touch, revealing a single contact, Dante. There's food in the kitchen, Sophia continued, moving toward the hallway. I'll put these clothes away in your closet. Please, eat something. You're far too thin. She disappeared into the bedroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a phone that felt like a tether to a man I barely knew but couldn't stop thinking about. I made coffee. Real coffee. From beans that probably cost more than my hourly wage, using a machine that looked like it belonged in a professional cafe. The first sip was revelation. Rich, smooth, perfect. I stood at the counter drinking it, staring at Dante's name on the phone screen. Call if you need anything. What did I need? Safety? Yes. Dante had given me that. A place to stay, clothes, food, all provided. But what about answers? What about understanding what the hell I was doing here? What he expected? What happened next? My thumb hovered over his name for a full minute before I pressed it. He answered on the first ring. Ava. His voice was rough, like he'd just woken up, and the intimacy of hearing it made my stomach flip. Are you all right? Did something happen? No, I'm fine. I paused, unsure how to articulate the chaos in my head. Sophia is here, with clothes and a phone and talk of boutiques, and I don't understand what's happening. You needed clothes. I provided them. Simple. Matter of fact. Is there a problem? Dante, this is too much. All of this. I can't accept all this from you, and I don't even know what you want from me. A pause. I could hear movement on his end, footsteps, a door closing. I told you what I want. Your company. Your time. The opportunity to know you. And the clothes? The apartment? The phone? What are those? Necessities. His voice held an edge of impatience. You left your husband's house with nothing but what you were wearing. Did you expect me to let you go without? I'm not a charity case, I said, hating how my voice wavered. I can take care of myself. Can you? The question was gentle but pointed. When's the last time you had money of your own? Resources that weren't controlled by someone else? Choices that were truly yours to make? I had no answer. He was right, and we both knew it. Accept the help, Ava, he said, softer now. Not because you're weak or because I'm trying to control you, but because you deserve it. Because 3 years of surviving doesn't mean you shouldn't get to live. Tears pricked at my eyes. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. I heard him exhale slowly. This isn't something I do, but I'm trying. We'll figure it out together. A pause. Let Sophia help you today. Get clothes that fit, that make you feel like yourself. And tonight have dinner with me. Here, at the apartment if you're comfortable, or somewhere public if you prefer. Just give me a chance to do this right. Do what right? Everything. The word held weight, promise, danger. I'll see you at 7. Marco will be outside if you need anything before then. He hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding the phone, feeling like I'd just agreed to something momentous without fully understanding the terms. Sophia emerged from the bedroom, her expression professionally neutral. Everything is put away. Shall we have breakfast before the appointments? The day passed in a blur of luxury I'd never experienced. Sophia drove me, in another black SUV with another silent, watchful driver, to boutiques where salespeople treated me like royalty, bringing champagne and chocolates while I tried on clothes that fit like they'd been made for my body. Which, according to Sophia, they would be once the tailors took my measurements. Mr. Salvatore has excellent taste, one boutique owner murmured, running her hands over a deep blue dress that made my eyes look luminous. This color is perfect for you, blue. He'd remembered my favorite color. By the time we returned to the apartment, the sun was setting and I was exhausted. Overwhelmed by shopping bags and tissue paper, and the sheer magnitude of what had been spent on me. Sophia helped carry everything upstairs, organized it all with military precision, then departed with instructions to call if I needed anything. Alone again, I stood in front of my new closet, filled with clothes I'd never dreamed of owning, and tried to process the surreal turn my life had taken. The elevator chimed at precisely 7. My heart stuttered as Dante stepped out, and I had to remind myself to breathe. He wore dark jeans and a black button-down, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that were surprisingly muscular, more casual than the suit, but no less devastating. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd recently showered, and the scent of him, cedar and smoke, filled the space immediately. "You look beautiful." His eyes traveled over the blue dress I'd chosen, the one the boutique owner had insisted on. "Sophia has good instincts. You told her my favorite color. It wasn't a question. I pay attention." He moved further into the apartment, carrying a bag that smelled incredible. "I brought dinner. I thought you might prefer to eat here tonight." More private, more intimate, he meant. No waiters, no other diners, just us. "What did you bring?" I asked, needing to focus on something normal, something safe. "Italian, homemade by my mother's cook." He unpacked containers onto the counter, each one releasing aromas that made my mouth water. Pasta carbonara, saltimbocca, tiramisu for dessert, nothing fancy, just comfort food. The domesticity of it, Dante Salvatore, Mafia boss, unpacking takeout containers in my kitchen, would have been funny if it weren't so disarming. We ate at the dining table, the city lights our backdrop, conversation flowing easier than I'd expected. He asked about my day, listened with genuine interest as I described the overwhelming experience of the boutiques. I asked about his, carefully avoiding the obvious question of what exactly his business entailed, and he told me about meetings, property investments, family obligations. "You're close to your mother?" I asked, remembering what he'd said about her. "She's everything." His expression softened. "After my father died, she could have fallen apart. Instead, she became stronger, built her own life, her own power. She taught me that protecting family isn't just about violence. It's about creating safety, building something that lasts. Does she know about me?" He smiled. "She knows I met someone interesting. She's curious." The idea of meeting Dante's mother terrified me more than anything else about this situation. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That I saw a woman being hurt and decided to intervene, that I can't stop thinking about her, that I'm in over my head and have no idea what I'm doing." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "She said that's how you know it matters. When you lose control, when you can't follow the script you've always followed." "What script is that?" "The one where I keep everyone at arm's length, where I don't let anyone close enough to become a weakness." His thumb traced circles on my palm. "You've already broken that script, Ava. From the moment I saw you." My breath caught. "You barely know me. Then help me know you better." He stood, pulling me up with him, leading me to the sofa that faced the windows. We sat, close but not touching, the city sprawling before us like a universe of possibilities. "Tell me about your family, your life before Derek." So I did. Talking came easier in the semi-darkness, with his presence beside me solid and reassuring. I told him about my parents, killed in a car accident when I was 19, leaving me alone and grieving. About meeting Derek 6 months later, how he'd seemed like salvation, someone steady and strong who could protect me. About the slow erosion of self that happened so gradually I hadn't noticed until it was too late. "He isolated you," Dante said, his jaw tight. "Classic pattern. Cut you off from friends, from your education, from anything that might give you independence." "I let him," I whispered. "I was so desperate not to be alone that I let him. No." Dante turned to face me fully, his hands cupping my face with that same careful gentleness. "You survived. You did what you had to do to stay alive. That's not weakness, Ava. That's strength." Tears spilled over despite my best efforts to contain them. "I don't feel strong. You left. When I gave you the opportunity, you didn't go back to him. You didn't make excuses, didn't try to salvage something that was destroying you. You chose yourself." His thumbs wiped away my tears. "That's the strongest thing you could do. With your help, I pointed out. I didn't leave on my own. You orchestrated it. I opened the door. You walked through it. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine. And you're still here, even though everything about this situation should terrify you. Even though you have every reason not to trust me, not to trust any man. You're here because you chose to be. I don't know why I did, I admitted. You're dangerous. You threatened to kill my husband. You probably have killed people. Everything about you screams danger, and I should run as far as possible. But you won't. Not a question. A certainty. No, I breathed. I won't. He kissed me then, slow and deep and claiming. His hands slid into my hair, angling my head for better access. And I melted into him, into this moment of surrender that felt nothing like the surrenders Derek had demanded. This felt like choice, like power. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against mine again. "Stay with me tonight," he murmured. "Not sex. Just stay. Let me hold you. Let me prove that touch doesn't have to hurt." Every rational thought screamed that this was too fast, too much, too dangerous, but my heart, my battered, bruised heart that had forgotten what safety felt like, wanted this, wanted him. "Okay," I whispered. He stood, pulling me up with him. The massive bed looked even bigger in the dim light, intimidating in its implications. But Dante simply pulled back the covers, kicked off his shoes, and settled against the headboard, arms open in invitation. I climbed in beside him, and he pulled me against his chest, my head tucked under his chin, his arms wrapped around me like a fortress. His heartbeat was steady beneath my ear, his warmth seeping into my bones. "Sleep," he murmured into my hair. "I've got you. You're safe." And impossibly, incredibly, I believed him. I drifted off to the rhythm of his breathing, to the security of his arms, to the strange new reality where the most dangerous man I'd ever met felt like the safest place I'd ever been. I woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the disconcerting realization that I was alone. The bed beside me was cold, the impression of Dante's body long faded from the sheets. Panic fluttered in my chest, irrational, immediate, until I heard sounds from the kitchen. Water running. The clink of dishes. I found him standing at the espresso machine, still wearing yesterday's jeans but shirtless, his back a canvas of muscle and ink. Tattoos covered his shoulder blades, intricate designs that looked like they told a story I couldn't yet read. A scar ran along his ribs, pale against tanned skin. He turned as I entered, and that devastating smile transformed his face. "Coffee?" "Please." I accepted the cup he offered, trying not to stare at the way morning light painted gold across his chest. "You stayed all night. I said I would." He leaned against the counter, watching me over the rim of his own cup. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in years." The admission felt vulnerable, dangerous. "You didn't have to stay." "Yes, I did." His expression turned serious. "Ava, I need to tell you something. About Derek." Ice water flooded my veins. "What about him?" "He tried to come back last night, around 2 a.m., drunk, making threats." Dante's voice was calm, controlled, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Marco stopped him before he reached the building. Derek is currently in a holding cell, charged with violating the restraining order that was filed yesterday." "Restraining order?" I had my lawyers file it, and several other documents." He set down his coffee. "Your divorce will be finalized in 4 weeks instead of 6. Derek signed the papers last night in exchange for reduced charges. He gets nothing. No alimony, no shared assets. You walk away clean." I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt dizzy, overwhelmed by how quickly Dante had dismantled my entire previous life. "You can't just... How did you... Money. Influence. The right pressure applied to the right people." He moved closer, his hands settling on my shoulders. "He's out of your life, Ava, permanently. He tries to contact you. He violates the order. He goes to prison. It's done. Just like that. Just like that." His thumbs rubbed small circles against my collarbone. "I told you I'd protect you. I meant it." The enormity of it hit me all at once. Freedom, real freedom, after 3 years of captivity. I set down my coffee cup with shaking hands and pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to overwhelm me. Dante pulled me against his chest, his arms wrapping around me with that now familiar combination of strength and gentleness. "Let it out," he murmured against my hair. "You're allowed to feel everything," so I did. I cried for the girl I'd been before Derek, for the 3 years I'd lost, for the fear I'd carried like a second skin. I cried for the relief of it being over, and for the terror of what came next. Dante held me through all of it, one hand stroking my back, the other cradled against my head, murmuring words in Italian that I couldn't understand but felt in my bones. When the tears finally subsided, I pulled back enough to look up at him. "What happens now? Whatever you want." He brushed a strand of hair from my face. "You can stay here, start over, go back to school if you want. I'll handle the tuition. Or travel, work, anything. The world is open to you now. And you?" The question felt loaded with meaning. "Where do you fit in all this? Wherever you'll have me." His honesty was devastating. "I know this is fast. I know I've upended your life in ways that probably terrify you. But Ava, I meant what I said. I want to know you. Really know you. Not just rescue you and disappear." Why? I needed to understand this obsession, this intensity that had focused on me with such singular purpose. He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching mine. "My father used to tell me that some people are born to build empires, and some are born to remind us why empires matter. You're the second kind, Ava. You remind me that all the power, all the control, all the violence I'm capable of, it only means something if I use it to protect people who deserve protecting." He cupped my face in his hands. "You walked into that grocery store invisible, trying not to exist, and something in me demanded that I make you seen, make you safe, make you mine. I'm not a possession," I said, but the words lacked heat. "No, you're a choice." His thumb traced my lower lip, my choice. "And I'm hoping eventually I'll be yours too." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of transformation. True to his word, Dante gave me space to breathe, to heal, to figure out who I was without fear as my constant companion. He appeared every evening for dinner, sometimes at the apartment, sometimes at restaurants where he'd reserved private rooms, once at his mother's house, where I met the elegant, sharp-eyed woman who'd raised him. Isabella Salvatore had looked at me with the same intensity as her son, assessing, measuring. Then she'd smiled and pulled me into an embrace that smelled of expensive perfume and maternal warmth. "So you're the one who's made my son forget how to sleep," she'd said in accented English, her eyes twinkling. "Good. He needs someone who disrupts him." I enrolled in online classes to finish my degree. Dante had offered to pay for traditional university, but I wasn't ready for that kind of exposure yet. Baby steps. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. N. Chen, a calm woman who specialized in domestic violence survivors and didn't blink when I mentioned Dante's involvement in my escape. "What matters," she'd said during our 3rd session, "is that you're choosing your path forward. Whether that path includes him or not, the choice is yours." And slowly, carefully, I started choosing him. Not because he'd rescued me, though he had. Not because he was powerful and protective and willing to use both those things on my behalf, though he was. But because beneath all that danger, beneath the casual violence and the empire built on fear, I'd found something unexpected: kindness, patience. A man who listened when I talked about books, who remembered that I took my coffee with cream and sugar, who never pushed for more than I was ready to give, who held me through nightmares about Derek and never once made me feel weak for having them. 4 weeks after that night in the grocery store, the divorce papers arrived. Final, official, legal proof that I was no longer Mrs. Derek Morrison. I was just Ava. Just myself. Dante took me to dinner to celebrate. Not one of his usual exclusive restaurants, but a small Italian place his mother had recommended. Family-owned and warm. We sat in a corner booth, wine flowing freely, and for the first time since I'd met him, I felt something shift between us. The fear was gone. The uncertainty had faded. What remained was choice, clear and uncomplicated. I want to stay, I said suddenly, interrupting his story about some business negotiation. In the apartment. With you, if you'll have me. Not because I'm afraid, or because I have nowhere else to go, but because I choose you. Dante went very still, his wine glass suspended halfway to his lips. Ava, I know what you are, I continued, needing to say this while I had the courage. I know the things you do, the world you operate in. I'm not naive enough to think it's all legitimate business and charitable donations, but I also know who you are with me. Patient and protective, and so careful with my heart it makes me want to cry sometimes. I know you've killed people, and I know you'd kill for me without hesitation. And somehow that doesn't terrify me the way it should. It should, he said roughly. Everything about this should terrify you. But it doesn't. I reached across the table, taking his hand. You terrify me in good ways. You make me want to be brave enough to match your intensity, to be someone worthy of the way you look at me. You're already worthy. He turned his hand to lace our fingers together. You've always been worthy. I just made you see it. Then let me stay. Let me choose this life with you, knowing exactly what it means. He stood abruptly, pulling me up with him, and kissed me right there in the middle of the restaurant with an intensity that made my knees weak. It was claiming and possessive and absolutely shameless, and I kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring 3 weeks of building tension into the contact. When we finally broke apart, the other diners were politely looking away, but I caught more than one smile. Take me home, I whispered against his lips. His eyes darkened. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. The drive back to the apartment was charged with electricity. Dante's hand stayed on my thigh the entire time, his thumb drawing maddening circles against the fabric of my dress. Marco drove with professional discretion, his eyes firmly on the road, but I caught his small smile in the rearview mirror. In the elevator, Dante pushed me against the wall, his body pressing into mine, his mouth tracing fire down my neck. Tell me to stop, he growled against my skin. Tell me you need more time. I don't. I pulled his head back to mine, kissing him with all the pent-up desire I'd been carefully controlling. I need you. Now. We barely made it through the apartment door before his hands were in my hair. My dress was pooling at my feet, and he was lifting me against the wall with strength that should have frightened me but instead made me feel powerful, desired, chosen. What happened next was nothing like the cold, mechanical encounters I'd endured with Derek. This was fire and passion, and two people learning each other with desperate intensity. Dante touched me like I was precious, and claimed me like I was his in equal measure, and I gave myself to him completely, trusting him with vulnerabilities I'd thought were broken beyond repair. After, we lay tangled in sheets, the city lights painting patterns across our skin. His fingers traced lazy circles on my bare shoulder, while I listened to his heartbeat slow to normal. I love you, he said quietly, the words hanging in the air between us. I probably loved you from the moment I saw you trying to disappear in that grocery store. I know it's too soon. I know I shouldn't say it, but I'm done pretending I don't feel it. My heart stuttered. 3 weeks ago, I'd been married to a man who'd made me fear my own shadow. Now I was in bed with a Mafia boss who'd just confessed his love like it was the most natural thing in the world. I love you too, I whispered, surprised to find it was true. You're terrifying and possessive and probably bad for me in 100 different ways, but I love you anyway. He laughed, a real laugh, full of genuine joy, and pulled me closer. I'll be so good for you, he promised against my hair. I'll build you a world where you never have to be afraid again, where you can be as loud and bright and powerful as you were always meant to be. And possessive? I teased, tracing the tattoos on his chest. Unbearably. He caught my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm. You're mine, Ava. I don't share. I don't compromise. And I sure as hell don't let go of what belongs to me. Good, I said, surprising us both. Because I'm kind of possessive too, and you're mine just as much as I'm yours. His smile was pure satisfaction. Fair enough. Team, we stayed like that for hours, talking and touching and building something new from the ashes of who we'd been before. When dawn painted the sky pink and gold again, I watched the sun rise from the safety of Dante's arms and realized this was what freedom felt like. Not the absence of cage bars, but the choice to stay. 6 months later, I stood in the same grocery store where it had all begun, Dante at my side, his hand possessive at the small of my back. I was shopping for ingredients for dinner. Real cooking in the massive kitchen of the penthouse that was now officially our home. Not just mine. "You're sure about the carbonara?" I asked, studying a package of pancetta. "My mother's recipe is perfect," Dante assured me. "You just need to trust the process." We'd fallen into this routine, cooking together, me slowly learning the recipes of his childhood, while he learned to appreciate my simpler comfort foods. Our lives had blended in unexpected ways. I'd finished my degree online and started volunteering at a women's shelter, using my story to help others escape their own Derek Morrisons. Dante had gradually let me into his world, teaching me the family business, the legitimate parts anyway, and letting me see the empire he'd built. As we walked down the dairy aisle toward the checkout, I caught sight of our reflection in the security mirror overhead. Dante, tall and powerful in his usual dark suit, his hand never leaving my back. Me, in jeans and a cashmere sweater, my hair styled, my face free of bruises, my eyes bright with something that looked suspiciously like happiness. We looked like we belonged together, and we did. "What are you thinking?" Dante asked, following my gaze. "That 6 months ago I was standing right here, invisible and terrified. And you walked into my life and changed everything." He pulled me close, right there in the middle of the grocery store, uncaring of the other shoppers. "You changed everything first," he said against my hair. "You just didn't know it yet. I love you," I whispered. "I love you more." He kissed the top of my head, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it. Later that night, after we'd cooked dinner together and eaten on the balcony overlooking the city, Dante pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "I know it's fast," he said, dropping to one knee with the same certainty he brought to everything else. "I know we've only had 6 months. But Ava, I've waited my entire life to find someone who makes me want to build rather than destroy, someone who reminds me why power matters, so I can protect the people I love. Marry me. Not because you have to, not because you're afraid, but because you choose me the way I choose you. Every day, for the rest of our lives." The ring was beautiful, a sapphire the deep blue of my favorite color, surrounded by diamonds that caught the light like stars. I didn't hesitate. "Yes." He slid the ring onto my finger, stood, and kissed me with an intensity that stole my breath. Behind us, the city sprawled in endless possibility. But all I could see was him. All I could feel was the rightness of this choice. This man. This life we were building together. I'd walked into a grocery store invisible and walked out seen. I'd been broken and found someone who treated my pieces like treasures worth keeping. I'd been afraid and found someone who made me brave. And now, I was choosing forever with the dangerous, beautiful man who'd looked at my bruises and decided they were the last ones I'd ever wear. "Mrs. Salvatore," Dante murmured against my lips, testing out the title. "How does that sound?" "Like coming home," I whispered back. And it did. After years of cages and fear and making myself small, I'd finally found the place I was always meant to be. Not saved, not rescued, just loved. Completely, obsessively, irrevocably loved. And I loved him right back, with every piece of my healing heart.